नमस्कार दोस्तों, हमारे YouTube चैनल पर आप लोगों का एक बार फिर से स्वागत है। अक्सर आप लोग इस चैनल पर क्रिकेटर्स को देखते हैं और उनकी कहानियां सुनते हैं, लेकिन आज हमारे साथ एक खास मेहमान है और कहीं से ये नहीं, ऑस्ट्रेलिया से हैं, लेकिन पूरी दुनिया में क्रिकेट कवर करती हैं, इंग्लैंड में, बाकी जगह में, और उन्होंने सारी चीजें की हुई हैं। मतलब एक मल्टी फॉर्मेट जर्नलिस्ट हैं। प्रिंट के लिए उन्होंने काम किया है, टीवी के लिए किया है, डिजिटल कर रही हैं, यूट्यूब कर रही हैं। इनका खुद का अपना चैनल है, किसी परिचय की मोहताज नहीं। मेलिंदा फरेल, इनसे मैं पहली बार इंग्लैंड में मिला, बहुत दिनों से वैसे इंग्लैंड में है, तो इन्हीं से बातचीत का सिलसिला स्टार्ट करते हैं। Melinda, first of all, thank you so much for joining my show.
Oh, that's okay. I got about 10 words of that. That's
Yeah.
all. I caught about 10 words in there.
You caught that?
You could have basically said she looks like an elephant and smells really bad too, and I wouldn't even know what you said. So you can get away with anything.
But honestly, have you picked any Hindi words?
Oh, look, there's a few things. Yeah, if I'm in a rickshaw, I can say sida sida, and I notice which is buy and which is die, and the only reason I know that is because an Indian friend of mine taught me to go like this, because that makes a B, so that's buy, that makes a D, so that's die. So that's how I remember if I'm having to direct anyone in an auto rickshaw. So you know,
In press, you have enjoyed doing interview, or you want to do the interview in future? Someone you just
do you know what? When I was there in 2017, I did an interview with Rishabh Pant, and it was before he played for India. So he's 18, I think, at the time, and I was in Delhi, and we came away from it, and I just laughed. I said, he's like the most confident 18-year-old I reckon I've ever seen. Because often, teenagers, if you interview them, they're not really sure of what to say. He was just funny and cheeky in a fun way, and he was, and so I sort of went away from that like thinking, I hope he goes really well because he's really good fun.
तो मेलिंदा ने एक बड़ी खूबसूरत बात यहाँ पर कही। इन्होंने कहा, जब इनसे पूछा कि किस प्लेयर से इनको इंटरव्यू था, इन्होंने ओवन मॉर्गन की तारीफ की कि ओवन मॉर्गन ने इनको कितना वक्त दिया। इंडियन प्लेयर्स के साथ थोड़ी सी टाइमिंग की इश्यूज रहती है, लेकिन जब उनसे पूछा कि उनका फेवरेट कौन है, तो उन्होंने ऋषभ पंत का नाम लिया। ऋषभ पंत, वो भी जब वो 18 साल के ऋषभ पंत थे, और उन्होंने कहा कि इतना कॉन्फिडेंट उस उम्र में आपको देखने को नहीं मिलता है। वो बात, जिस तरह से वो मजाक कर रहे थे, लहजे में, तमीज में रह के मजाक कर रहे थे, और जो उनका कॉन्फिडेंस था, तो ऋषभ पंत को वो काफी याद करे। अब तो ऋषभ पंत एक सुपरस्टार बन चुके हैं। सो हैव यू एवर रिमाइंडेड ऋषभ पंत दैट यू डिड दैट इंटरव्यू अगेन?
Yeah. I think there's really nice photos on my Instagram page. There's really sort of sweet photo. Yeah, he always says hello. Okay. I like Rishabh. I'm really pleased that he's gone on and done well.
Any other players you wanted to do an interview? Anyone from past that you, whenever you tour India, that is on your bucket list?
I'd love to do something with Rahul Dravid again, actually, because we did polite inquiries, and I used to do that for ESPN Cricket Info, and he used to sometimes do that with us. We used to call him the work experience kid, and he's just a very interesting person who I think has some great thoughts on cricket, and obviously has done so well with the young teams that have come through. I think a lot of credit to India's success, say in Australia when they won the series over there 18 months ago. A lot of that, especially the batting, I think he should have a lot of credit for. So I'd love to catch up and interview राहुल द्रविड़ again.
राहुल द्रविड़ के साथ इंटरव्यू करना चाहती हैं, आगे देखिए फ्यूचर में इनके साथ। अब एक मेलिंदा का अपना खुद का यूट्यूब चैनल है और काफी अच्छा कंटेंट है, मेलिंदा फेरेल के नाम से। आप जाएंगे, सर्च करेंगे तो इनके काफी काम आपको देखेंगे। इसके अलावा इन्होंने ESPN के साथ काम किया, ESPNcricinfo.com में। जो भी इंग्लिश के जो दर्शक हैं वो काफी इनके नाम से परिचित हैं। अब चलते चलते चूंकि इंटरव्यू हम क्लोज कर रहे हैं, एक सवाल इनसे पूछना चाहेंगे। Have you been to India ever before?
Of course, yeah. I've been to India maybe 5 or 6 times. I was there for 2 months in 2016 when the T20 World Cup was on. I was there in 2017 for 2 months when the Australia Test Tour, and then I stayed on for the IPL as well. So yeah, I've spent quite a lot of time in India, but not for a few years. So very, very, very much hoping to get back there next year.
You have covered cricket all around the world. So what's been special? Because for cricketers, touring India has always been special. From a cricket journalist point of view, Is that much interesting for a journalist?
Oh, of course, it was amazing. I always say, in India, you basically know every sense is alive because sights, sounds, smells, tastes, everything is really intense, and it's like it lifts up a notch. So you're always really aware of all your surroundings. And I've been really lucky because the other thing I think that struck me was I've been to a lot of different cities and just how each city had its own character, whether it's Kolkata and you see the yellow ambassador taxis and the colourful trams and buses, whether it's Bangalore and the great beer microbreweries and stuff that are there, Dharamshala of course. They're just all, they've got their own different flavour, and that's one of the things I really loved about India.
मेलिंदा ने जो कहा, मैं आपको, हालांकि बातें आपको समझ में आ गई क्योंकि इनको भारत काफी पसंद है, कई बार उन्होंने भारत का दौरा किया है, और सबसे अच्छी चीज ये बता रही कि अलग अलग शहरों की अलग अलग खासियत है, और इंडिया में आपको हर तरह के आपके सेंस जो हैं, सूंघने से लेके मतलब देखने तक की हर चीज अलग अलग होती है। आगे बातचीत का सिलसिला आगे बढ़ाएंगे। मेलिंदा, टेल अस समथिंग अबाउट क्रिकेट हैज बीन एसेंशियली in the last, say, so many years, it has been about male sport, predominantly male journalists covering the sport. So for you, entry, was it normal or was it challenging? Could you talk about your journey for our lot of upcoming female journalists who can take inspiration from you?
Wow, I don't know how inspiring I am, but it's something. I mean, we're here today at Old Trafford, and I think I'm the only female journalist here today. So that's quite common. It's unusual if there's more than two or three. That's quite unusual still. And I think particularly in the written press, there's a lot more progress that's been made in broadcasting. And I think one reason for that is that there's more pressure on broadcasters because you can see and you can hear a female voice. So as there's been a push for more diversity, that's taken hold more in broadcasting. In written media, it's different because you can't hear a voice or see a person when you read something. So there's been less pressure on organisations to diversify. And a lot of the stuff I did at first was video stuff as well. So and I do a lot more writing now. That came later. So it can be a bit intimidating if I'm being really honest. It's especially at the start. I look at some of the young guys who walk into press boxes and I think, God, I love 1,000th of the confidence that they've got walking in. So yeah, it's still quite an intimidating place, and I don't see many come in.
Yeah.
I don't see many young women still coming into it.
When did you start?
So when I started cricket full time was about 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
And yeah, it hasn't really changed.
But do you think that since the focus of ICC is a lot these days on women's sports, especially in India also, a lot of emphasis that for women IPL and all that, do you think that will also help the women journalists in generally, or maybe?
Yeah, I think particularly in the broadcast of it, there are more. There are more women who write on women's cricket than women who write on men's cricket, and I think that sometimes, say, editors will, if there's a women's series, they'll send the girl. There's a little bit of that around it. Maybe that will change things a little bit. But certainly the women's game has grown heaps since the first time I commentated or first time I wrote on a match, and I would be the only one there. So it's definitely come a long way, and maybe that is an avenue as well. I'd like to see a lot more of the men who write about the game, write about the women's game as well, and then see some of the women who write about that, because it's, at the end of the day, it's cricket, isn't it? You know more about your specific teams, but we'll see. It might take a few progressive editors to perhaps make that happen.
How has been your experience dealing with superstar cricketers, both the Indians and non-Indians? Do you think that there is a difference, especially a female sportsperson a female journalist is there in terms of interview or access or doing stories?
Oh, access has always been more difficult for India. That's always been the most difficult team to get access to. But I certainly haven't felt like there's being female has been a part of that at all. And when you actually get the chance to talk to the Indian cricketers, they're terrific. They've all been really good. Most of them are. They're all, pretty professional and respectful, and there aren't many cricketers that you'd say.
Who's been your favorite, if I may ask? One player who has impressed you most with his mannerism and all that. You just even if you haven't chatted a lot overall.
Do you know? So someone I always say, probably the player who's been the most generous with his time. It was probably Owen Morgan. I did a big written piece on Owen before the 2019 World Cup, and I was in Australia, he was in England, and we basically would FaceTime, and it'd be nighttime where I was, so I'd have a glass of wine, he'd have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and we probably ended up talking for about 3 hours. Now, and then we did an hour-long video interview when I came over here, so probably had 4 hours. And either no other player has ever given me that much time. That's a lot of time to be willing to do. And it wasn't like someone who had done loads of personal interviews. So I really appreciate.
In the Hindi filmों की शौकीन है तो उनसे पूछते हैं you were talking about some Hindi film dialogue you can't forget. Can you tell me?
Look, I was taught this once by a Bollywood actor. And because I wanted to know what it was like, in American films, there are those famous lines like, now I can't think of any, but famous lines. And he taught me one to say, I think I still remember it. It goes, Kute mentera kun pijangi. And you have to say it like that, with like, Kute. And yes, I know what it means. I'm sorry. I hope I haven't offended you.
नरिंदा ने धर्मेंद्र का ये डायलॉग दिया है. धर्मेंद्र को कई फिल्मों में आपने सुना होगा और काफी खूबसूरत लगा इनके मुंह से सुनने से. Thank you so much, Narinder, and we wish you all the best and hope to see you. Hope to catch you in India.
I hope
Please
so.
welcome to India.
I hope I'll be there in February.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Good one. Good
nice.
One. So it was.